And look who's coming up.
All right, just past 4:22 Eastern Time. My name is Dean Millard. This is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily. We are here Monday to Friday, and this is the best time of the year to be talking sports. I mean, it literally is. Tonight, I could watch. I could watch a Thursday night football game with the undefeated Dolphins team. I could watch the chase for history in the playoffs in Major League Baseball, and I can go to the rink and watch the next great superstar in hockey, Connor Bedard, because the Regina Pats are here. I mean, it really is awesome. You can watch preseason hockey if you want as well. It's not as exciting, but it's still, we're getting close to that beautiful time of the year where all four sports do indeed collide. Was amazing. Back in the day doing sportscasts when these things were going on, it was awesome just to doing highlights of all four sports in a single day. It is absolutely the magic time of the year, I like to say. And we're going to talk with a gentleman who has experienced fall ball up close and personal, and has some fun stuff going on now with What's Your Call Sports, as I'm joined by Erik Grosman once again. Erik, thanks so much for joining me, being patient with me as I was down for the count the past couple of days. But history made last night, and it's a guy who worked on a baseball team for a long time in the communications department. I mean, what do you think this moment would have been like? What was this like for the communications team? Because this is important night for the Yankees, but it's in Toronto.
Yeah, for sure. And again, thank you so much for having me on, Dean. Yeah, it's incredible. Like, I was thinking, oftentimes when I'm watching, I'm like, oh, it would be cool, to experience, something like that. Working there for with the Jays for 15 years, you experience a lot of stuff, but never had a 61 or anything like that. What I always tried to do, even like sometimes to a fault, is I don't ever want to interfere with the moment. You know what I mean? Like I never want to get in the way of a player's emotional state, especially when it's such a positive one like this. So what I would do is basically let the player lead the way. Whatever they're comfortable with is what I'm going to be comfortable with, because ultimately you want them to be comfortable. That was always my mind frame. So it's truly amazing that it happens in Toronto. I hope he gets 62 as soon as he can, as soon as possible. That's obviously that'd be the one for sure.
It's always crazy hearing these stories, and you see people like, I bought a ticket last minute, went to the game and caught Mark McGwire's 70th ball. And I think the guy that bought that ball ended up selling it for $3 million after the Cardinals. I think Mark McGwire said, no, I don't want to meet him. And the guy's like, okay, I'll just go sell the ball for $3 million. Have you ever had to negotiate with a fan over some milestone moments for baseball players? Or, in hockey, the puck is right there. In football, they're right there. It's the one sport where it's kind of hard to get that milestone ball back sometimes.
Oh, man, I wish I'm going to give a shout out to the guy I worked with, Mal Romanen. So Mal Romanen, when he was the manager of Baseball Information, he was in Minnesota, I want to say, when Frank Thomas hit his 500th, I do believe, in Minnesota. So he was responsible for trying to get the ball. I'm trying to remember exactly how that went down. So Frank Thomas hits the home run when he was with the Jays for that 1 or 2 years he was there, back in 2007, I want to say. He hits his 500th home run. AJ Burnett's on the mound, and I believe Burnett got tossed in that game. I'm just trying to remember. Mal had to go in. There was something with Burnett, and then there was something with Frank Thomas. I think the main part of the story was that Mal had to go and talk to that fan who caught the ball on behalf of Frank. I do believe, and that it was so long ago. I wish I had a better recollection of it, but it was not easy, Dean. It was really, really difficult to get that ball. Because I get it. It makes sense, right? From both sides. Like what would you do if you were in that situation? It's a great question. I don't know. What would you do, Dean?
Well, listen, if I'm, it depends on my financial situation. Who can turn down $3 million for catching a ball, whatever? At the same time, I mean, the guy who caught the one Judge ball gave it back because he said, Judge has done so much. Like, that's amazing. Like, that guy could be giving away millions. I guess it depends on who you are and what that player means to you and your family and what it could mean financially. There's not a chance I would fault anybody for catching one of those balls and selling it. I mean, that's your right. You bought the ticket or whatever as a fan. There's when Mike Evans threw that Brady ball into the crowd, they did everything to get that ball back. But that fan could have said, no, that's my future nest egg for my family. I would not blame anybody. So honestly, if I'm a 25-year-old kid, I'm probably selling that ball.
It's hard to argue, isn't it? I know. It's like literally winning a lottery ticket. A winning lottery ticket just being shot at you and you have it in your hands. Like, it takes a lot. Like, the Yankee fans who just gave the ball to back to Judge when he hit his, what was it, his 60th, I think. Yeah. I honor that too. Like, I think I really respect that someone just to get a bat back or a signed bat or something like that. That seemed pretty easy, but again, not for me to say. He was the one that got the ball. So I definitely see it both ways. But man, I wish I remembered that story. I remember Mal was telling me it was really hard to get that ball. And the Frank Thomas 500. So I can only imagine what this one would be like. So
the negotiations and everything. But you're right. Like, it's part. The thing I would not fault the fan is that at least the player has the bat, the gloves. Like, they have everything else, right? So do they need the ball? I guess if they really want the ball, they can negotiate. But anyway, it was a great moment. Like you said, it was neat that it happened in Canada, and it's neat that it happened with two teams that could face each other in the playoffs. I mean, when you listen to that call, and you watch that, there was respectable applause. But as Jays fans are like, no, this is the Yankees. This is a team we could be playing in the playoffs. We respect your accomplishment, but we're not going on. It wasn't like the Dodgers fans cheering for Albert Pujols the other day.
So true. And what did you think about when the fans were actually booing?
Hey,
the other day what did you think about them when they were walking? I think they walked 4 times, right?
Yeah, and because they want to see history.
Yeah. It's hard. It's really. Who would have thought there'd be a day where the Yankees are coming into Toronto and you're booing the Blue Jays, not the Yankees?
Yeah, because you want to see history. And it's like, Wayne Gretzky gets traded from Edmonton to L.A. He comes back with L.A. and obviously gets a standing ovation like players do. And the only time he got cheered after that was when he broke Gordie Howe's record. Like, he was the opponent. He was the other guy on the other side. It's like Kobe Bryant. I don't know if you've seen the Redeem documentary where he just runs over Pau Gasol. He's like, this is not my teammate, and he's like, that's pro sports. Like, the Blue Jays fans, I like that they wanted to see history, but then it was like, okay, that moment is over. You are now the enemy again, and what a race this is going to be. I mean, this is better than I can. You and I talked last time. Does it feel different? This is so much better than I expected because so many teams, there's so many moving parts every night, and it's not just where you finish; it's where you finish and get to host an entire series.
Yeah. It's amazing. And again, we did talk about this last time. Whatever, everyone has their own opinion. That's what makes sports so great, really. Some people like the way it used to be. I'm only in favor of what's going to benefit the game, what's going to benefit the fans. That's the only thing I'm interested. If this works for the fans, then you just keep it. Like when the NBA added that extra, that 1-game playoff thing, right? Like it just, all of a sudden 10 teams are now involved. Like the more teams you get to, it shines a light on more players. There's more interest. I think overall it's great, but I always kind of get a little bit resistant when a team gets to host for 3 games. Like that should be interesting because I always felt like to be on the road sometimes, especially in baseball, it was almost sometimes better. You're almost more relaxed, if that makes any sense. Sure. Because you're not trying to put on a show. You're not trying to, there's less headaches. There's less distractions, if you will. When you're at home, it's almost too familiar. Again, also depends on the venue. Blue Jays might be a little bit different with the Rogers Center. To host those games might mean more than someone else. But I remember when we played the Rangers in 15, we lost the first two at home, and then we won the next two on the road. And then what led to Game 5, which is obviously a magical game. But but the road, I find that you relax sometimes on the road a little bit more. You're more focused on the actual game itself, not worrying about tickets here, not worrying about families over there. It's just you and your team, and some family might come out, but not always. It just, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like I wouldn't guarantee a victory just for, just because you get to host 3 games, to be honest with you.
Yeah, just because you get last at bat. And the big thing, honestly, and this is not by any means getting political, but the vaccination status change is massive for teams looking at saying, holy, we have to go into Toronto for 3 games without so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. So that kind of is out of the question now, and I really am happy for that. And Toronto right now, like Baltimore loses, and Baltimore right now is losing 5-3 to the Red Sox in the 9th. So if this happens, the Jays clinch, then they can just focus. And, people always say, oh, if you can't get here, you should drop to here. You can't just drop. You can't just go out and say, oh, we're going to drop to 6th now. Like, you want to, if you can catch whoever you can catch, you catch them, and you finish where you finish. You always want to go in on a roll. This notion of trying to set yourself up to play a weaker opponent is bad karma.
100%. Oh, you never want to be in that position. You never want that mindset. That's damaging. It really is. And I don't think players really think like that. But do you remember when they changed the playoff format, when there's only 4 teams, that actually was happening, that it came down? Do you remember that? Where winning your division wasn't a big deal.
No.
It wasn't. You didn't get anything extra. There was no bye. There was no nothing. So I remember there was I think it was the Rays and another team didn't want to play the Yankees or whoever, or someone in the first round. Or it was the Rangers, actually. They didn't want to play Texas in the first round. So Joe Madden with the Rays, in the last game of the season, where if they had won, they would have played Texas, he didn't. He went with a bullpen game. He didn't even start his pitcher. Huh. So and the Yankees were doing the same thing. They were trying not to win. That's just bad for baseball. I think that's probably what spearheaded that change, if I recall.
Yeah, you just never. That's just a situation you never ever want. Like, that's you're affecting the integrity of the game. You're affecting so many things. So you always need to put your best team forward. But this is going to be fun. I mean, this is a playoff chase where you got both New York teams in the playoffs. That's really good for baseball. Obviously, you got LA, you've got the Canadian market. So, then you've got some markets that you didn't think that you were going to have in Cleveland. As I said, Baltimore is going to likely fall out of the race. You got the defending champs in. I mean, this is a really good, in my opinion, debut for this playoff format, because you have big markets and you have familiar teams, the defending champs, and all that stuff. So I think it's going to be really good for baseball, in my opinion.
100%. I mean, this is what you want, right? You want those big names and the big lights, and this is really, this is what it comes down to. This is why you stick with 162 games, for this exact moment that we're in. To have those big markets like New York, and I'm actually kind of happy to see the Mets be good again. It's great. It's good when those teams are really good. It really helps the league. It really does. And then you get those little underdogs. Like, this is something, ask your listeners or figure out, because every year it seems like there's always one surprise team in each league, no matter what. So then it's kind of fun to pick who would that dark horse be in each side, because there's always one that kind of does a little bit of damage, a little bit of noise before they meet their match, kind of, per se. But like, Dean, like, in your mind, like, who do you think are those two teams? Like, one from each league. Who do you think?
Well, I think certainly Cleveland. I think I think that's everybody's kind of Cinderella. Baltimore was that team for a while when they were in the running, and those young players are really exciting. From the American League, or from the National League, I don't know what to think of the Padres right now. Like, are the Padres playing possum, or are they just really this bad? Like, there's no contest in that NL West. So, it's weird. Like, the Dodgers have won 107 games. and they're so far ahead of everybody that nobody's even talking about them.
there are some teams, and you know who they are. They can turn it on. Like those old, like not the old veteran, but like teams like the Yankees or whoever, like teams that have players that like kind of like been there, done that kind of stuff. Those guys can like the old Jays teams, like they could you can turn it on when you want. The Padres aren't in that league yet. They're you always end up who you are when it's all said and done. Like this is the one thing to keep an eye on for the playoffs. Who's got a lot of versatility in pitching? Who's got deep pitching? Not just starters, but relievers. Because ultimately, it's going to come down to bullpens. But here's the tricky part, and this is why I don't always put like regular season, postseason. It's of course you got to be good in the regular season to get to postseason. But I mean, when you get to the postseason, all of a sudden, guys who start can now come in the 8th inning and 9th inning. Like you would never see that in the regular season. Like Clayton Kershaw's not coming out in the 9th inning ever during the regular season at any point. But how many times do you see a dominant starter who it's not their turn in the rotation, but they just raise their hand and say, "I'm ready, Skip." Like I
don't like it. And I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah.
Because you know why? Because you're going over the guys that got you there in the regular season in that spot. Dave Roberts did that a few years ago, and I didn't like it. I mean, your bullpen guys are your bullpen guys for a reason. If those bullpen guys are gassed and they can't go, I totally get that. But I don't like stepping over a guy whose role it was all season to bring in a guy who hasn't pitched in that role in how long? Maybe once, twice a year, if that.
It's not for everybody. No, you can't just pick and choose who you want to do that. You have to be made for that. There are certain players, like remember that year Baumgartner with the Giants, he completely just took over. Yeah. So this is my point. Like the point I was trying to make is anything goes in the playoffs. Not everything doesn't go in the regular season. Right. So like all of a sudden, Baumgartner's absolute dominant. Like he literally won that World Series for them. For the Giants, he came on. There was one game I remember. He came in the 6th inning, and he's just like, "Okay, I got it. Thanks, everybody." Yeah. And then the other teams going, "Oh man, like that was the last thing in the world they wanted to see."
The Diamondbacks did it with Johnson and Schilling when they had them too, right? To close out that series. So you're right. It does go. And if your pitchers are gassed, I totally get it. You know what team I would not like? I'm a Dodgers fan. The team I don't want the Dodgers to face is the St. Louis Cardinals, because they're that veteran team that I think you're talking about that can turn it on, and not just because of Pujols, but Goldschmidt, Arenado, and their pitching staff. Like Wainwright and Yadier Molina set the record for most batteries, pitching and catcher battery matchups in Major League Baseball. And the thing is, like, we've all been so excited about Albert Pujols, we've kind of forgotten about what Paul Goldschmidt has done this year. And you and I were going to talk about AL MVP, NL MVP. Yeah. I think everybody is now on board with Judge. Is there somebody challenging Paul Goldschmidt, do you think, in the NL? Is that why we're not hearing enough about him? Because for a while, it was all the rage, and then Pujols mania kind of took over. For me, it's still Goldschmidt and Judge. Those are my two. Do you have different names?
I kind of do. The Goldschmidt one, I'm not, like, I want touching Goldschmidt. Like, that's my guy. Freddie Freeman, he'd be my runner-up. So, like, it's, I like what Freddie Freeman, like, he's just an unbelievable hitter. He's just an unbelievable player. Like, it's not that easy. It's really not that easy. Same goes for Goldschmidt. They just make it look so easy. Probably people aren't going to love my American League one. It's so obvious, obviously, with Judge. It's just so obvious. Like, he's just so, like, the year he's having, it's not just the home runs. He's more than the home runs. Like, he's literally carrying, like in baseball's the best sport, because one guy is not going to, like Bryce Hart. Bryce Hart was an unbelievable player, and the Washington Nationals won the year he left. Like, does that make any sense to you?
No.
Does it make any sense to you that Mike Trout, who's like the best player we've ever seen, they're always 20 games below 500 at the end when it's all said and done. So this year, this is where I'm leading with this. So my pick is actually not Judge. It's Ohtani. It is. I'm going with Ohtani, and here's why I'm going with Ohtani. Because Aaron Judge has to go 14-8 with a 2.47 ERA and throw 153 innings with 203 strikeouts with a whip of 107 and averaging 11.9 strikeouts per 9 innings and having 10 strikeout, 10 strikeout games of 10 or more strikeouts. Sorry, 10 games of 10 or more strikeouts. With the four triples, fourth in triples, fourth in home runs, fourth in slugging, and fourth in OPS. Ohtani's two superstars rolled up into one.
Yeah.
So is that fair? It's not really fair, but it's also not fair to disqualify Ohtani because he's on a bad team.
You're right.
If they switch,
it's fair. Yeah. It's fair because it's happening, and like Ohtani's pitching year. I think I read the other day, it's kind of like what Corbin Burns did last year, which is exceptional. And it's also not fair, or maybe it is fair, to hold Ohtani to his standard of hitting last year, right? Like he's fourth in a lot of those categories, but it's not last year. So I don't know. Is it fair to hold Ohtani last year and he has to live up to that standard? It is a really hard argument when you hear how high up he is, but it's still not like, is he hitting 47 home runs? Like,
no, he's got 34, so he's 40. That's the thing. It would have taken Ohtani to do exactly what he's doing for me not to pick Judge. Like, he needs to be dominant on both sides. If he was lacking in one of them, like let's say he was just good pitcher, just a good pitcher, not great, just good, right? Or reverse. If he was just good hitter, great pitcher, but good hitter, it's Judge one. Like it took what Ohtani's doing for even me to even think about somebody else, right? It's such a crazy game, baseball, where you can have Ohtani and Trout. So basically Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle on the same team. And they're not even close to the playoffs with the extra teams that we talked about to make it. Even with the extra teams, they're nowhere near it. So it's an unbelievable game that, you just can't fault a guy. Like Ohtani's got 14 wins on a team that doesn't have that many wins.
Yeah.
Right. So it's people, you've probably heard the argument before, like you can't pick an MVP if they didn't make the playoffs. Well, not in baseball, because in baseball, you can't control a game. He only can hit 4 times or 5 times in a game. He's not going to go 5 for 5 with 5 home runs. He can only do so much when you only get 4 at-bats. Judge has 4 at-bats. He gets walked 4 times. Well, then he really had no chance to make an impact, really. I mean, he still did, but you see what I'm saying? In basketball,
take the bat out of his hands,
Yeah, just give LeBron the ball when you're in a tough spot. He'll go get you 30 points. Like, you know what I mean? You can go to your best players, your Kevin Durant. Just everybody move away, let them do their thing. In baseball, you're either waiting for the ball in the outfield to get hit to you, or you're trying to get some good pitches when you're batting. But there's only so much you can do. So like what Ohtani is doing, I don't know. Do you feel like it's not getting an? I almost feel like people are taking it for granted. Some are just taking it for granted. Like they're going like, aha, like that's so cool. He's doing that, so cool. But I don't know if people really understand like what exactly this means.
Yeah,
like what exactly he's doing.
I certainly don't think it's getting the coverage it got last year because of the home run chase and Albert Pujols kind of and again the Angels suck again. Which it sounds like a Ron Schneider line or something like that.
Yeah.
But and so I think it's not getting covered as much because there's just, maybe people are taking, people are taking this for granted, they're crazy. Because how much longer can honestly Ohtani do this at the highest level? Like, how much longer can he be top 5 pitcher, top 5 hitter before he has to morph into one or the other? I honestly do wonder, or unfortunately injuries take over, because this is massive stress on his body. So people that take this for granted are crazy. Every time I see Ohtani coming up to bat, I'm tuning in just like I do with Judge, just like I was doing with Pujols, because I don't know how much longer we'll be able to see this. And as much as we think there might be other players, it's like what we talked about, just hit it where they aren't. Well, it's just not that easy. And it's just not that easy to become a dominant pitcher and a dominant hitter. Like John Olerud was one of those guys coming out of college and had to choose, right? I still think most guys are going to be asked to choose because most guys can't do this. Ohtani was in Japan, it's totally different than going through the college system in Major League Baseball or whatever.
100%. And that exactly was my point. There's nothing else he could possibly do. You couldn't ask him to do one more. Like what's the manager going to say next year? Say, hey, would you mind raising your batting average if you're like while you're at it or something? Like there's literally not, like, that's my point. Like he's done everything he could do and it's still not enough for them to be less 20 games below 500, which again, in any other sport, if you had Mickey Mantle and Babe Ruth, the equivalent on to their sport at the beginning of the year, you're picking them to win, aren't you? or at
You
least
should.
the conversation.
Yeah. Jays, by the way, officially clinched the playoff slot, so that's great. We'll find out where they're going to play in the next week or so. But I've taken up a lot of your time. I want to ask you this, though. We just talked about the Angels and what's going to happen. You know, there could be more managerial changes there. There could be an ownership change there, which is even bigger of a landscape changer. But let's focus on managers. Don Mattingly's not coming back for the Marlins. Who knows if Tony La Russa and Terry Francona are going to be back. The Blue Jays made a change. This is obviously a fantasy show. When guys are looking at, like, I know guys right now that are saying, oh, this player in Philadelphia under Tortorella is going to be awful, or this player under this coach. Managers have such a huge impact on not just how a guy plays, where he plays. When you're looking at fantasy, like, did you see an uptick in a few Blue Jays players? And are there guys out there that you're like, oh, this guy could really suffer, or this manager, this team needs to get this type of manager? I know it affects guys with stolen bases. You know, a certain aggressive manager comes in and you get the green light a little bit more. But, you know, managerial changes might have the biggest impact of anything when it comes to fantasy, because those are the guys doling out the lineup.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing I've seen from what makes a good manager from my experience, that it's getting to know each person, each player individually. You can't manage the same person you can't manage everybody the same way. Everybody's got their own rules. It's not preferential treatment by any stretch. It is, but it isn't. You can't manage Bo Bichette the way you're going to manage Vladimir Guerrero. You can't manage Vladimir Guerrero the way you're going to manage Matt Chapman. You can't, and so forth and so forth. You have to really understand the player. So I think what happened in the Blue Jays situation when they made that switch, and I actually at the time I said it was a great move. It was a great call. I actually think it saved their season, to be honest with you. I really do. Bo Bichette took off. Soon as that happened, Bo Bichette took off. Now, why? Just because you change a manager? Well, in this case, it kind of did. It's it could have it happened anyway? Of course it could have happened anyway. He could have just taken off. It could have been a coincidence, but I actually don't think it was. I don't think it was a coincidence. I think Montoyo, he was a great guy. You know, he did the best job he could. But it always comes down to the stuff that you don't see on the field. We all see the players. We all know that, we can all say who can bat where, who can do this. Moving Bichette down the lineup really helped them, right? You can see it really helped them. It just takes some pressure off. It just, it's understanding your player. So Bo Bichette, he really benefited from it, from the managerial change. Chapman as well. I took a look at who had the better splits, pre All-Star, post All-Star. Bo Bichette and Matt Chapman for sure benefited. Their numbers jumped. He went from an average, a little above average, to one of the best in the league. So you're talking overall managerial positions. I'm looking at the White Sox. What I always like to do with managers is like, okay, the season ends. Where are your big payrolls, and here's your big payroll, and here's your winning percentage. They got to mimic each other. They got to mimic. So if you have a high payroll, you need to have a high winning percentage. If you have a high payroll and your winning percentage is down here, that's a target right there. So the White Sox are too talented to not be this good, right? So that's the first place I go, and I'm biased. I have to admit, I think Gibby would be amazing for that team. I really do, because they have a little mix there. They have a mix between young and old, and they're all good. I think he would be really good there. I mean, there's probably many others. Cairo, I think, is the manager. He's the manager there now. I think he'd be fine too. I think they might stay, but I think Gibby's, if he wants to do it, he'd be good. Another one who I got to know a little bit, DeMarlo Hale. DeMarlo Hale. That's a name I think you should keep an eye on. I really do. I think he would be a great manager, and the reason why I think he would be a great manager is because you've got to be very level. You got to be very level. It's okay to be emotional, but not drastic. You really have to keep it. Baseball's such a long season. There's always going to be, like, you can never live in the moment. Like, no matter what happens in June or July and even August to some degree, like, oh, they're in trouble now, they're struggling. It doesn't matter until now. It matters now, right? And you need a manager to have that same mindset. It's the ones that are the calmer, level-headed, think it over, hire a good team, around them, like another coach, like coaches that can teach and that can communicate with the players. It's all about the communication. So this is the thing I'll leave you with here, Dean. This is the question. I heard an interview with Joe Madden, and he was saying, you know, there's managers now that are very careful about when they accept jobs because managers want to manage, right? Managers don't want to be told how to manage and have all this information thrown at them every single day and go by what, you know, but the analytics are always saying that he needs the analytics. He wants the analytics, yeah. But he wants to be the guy that takes the information and then he uses it with the players, and he can inform the players and not to overload anybody. Don't overload this guy. So any manager that takes a job today, you always find, wow, he's a young man. This person's a young manager. It's because they'll do that. They don't have any history. You know, they'll do whatever is needed to get done, right? But these older types, I don't want to say older types, but the Madden types, right? Mike Soch, those guys, they have to be okay with the new way of how it's done. Otherwise, they won't take the job. So then you're looking at a new pool of managerial candidates. They're going to be in that younger age, that younger demographic who played a little bit, but who are big on the analytics. I think that's where everyone's going, right? But Dusty Baker, how great of an idea was that? Whoever came up with that idea for Houston, that person needs something. I don't know who came up with that one, but you couldn't have asked for a better manager at that exact time.
You know what? That person deserves the Nobel Peace Prize because the Houston Astros were so hated. Like, they were so hated. And you bring in a guy, and listen, I'm a Dodgers fan. I love Dusty Baker because he was a Dodger, even though he was a Giants manager. He is universally loved. He's a cool guy. Like, I've read some books about him. He just sounds like back in the playing days, he was a real good dressing room guy, locker room guy. And so you're right. He went in there and he diffused a whole lot of stuff and turned them around again. So I love it. And I love that we can have these chats and baseball fans can do that with you guys on Twitter. What's your call sport? Tell us a little bit about what's your call sports, because it's pretty cool, because we all, like you say, we all have our own opinion and thoughts on, even when it's a factual, when it's an out, we think it was safe and different things like that, which is probably the most argued call. Tell us about what's your call sports.
Yeah, I mean, appreciate the plug here. Like, what's your call sports is, we started out as just like analyzing controversial plays, right? So, like, was he safe? Was he out? Like, was it a trap ball, not a trap ball, check swing, not a check swing, those kind of things. But really, when you broaden the scope, basically what we just talked about today, it's what's your call? What's your call? Who's the MVP? Who's the Cy Young Award winner? Who do you think is going to be the sleeper team in the playoffs? Who do you think is going to be the sleeper team, the player in the playoffs? Who do you look for? Who's the player that doesn't get the recognition during the season but shines in the playoffs all of a sudden? Some name that you may not have, heard of so much. Like, who are these things? What's your call? Your what's your call can mean basically anything. It's basically just debating about sports in a professional manner, right? So, and that's our platform. That's what we want to be. We want to be a place where we provide some content, but really it's for the fans and for the viewers to tell us what they want to see and what they're thinking, and we can have really good debates and discussions really about anything to do with sports. And look, maybe one day what you call sports becomes just what you call food, what you call movies, what you call music, right? Who is the better band? This one or that one? What's the better concert you ever been to? That one or that one? So, like, it opens itself up for a big thing, but that's really what you call sports. It's that gray area. It's that like, was he safe or is he out? If he was safe, why? And it was called safe. Why are you still arguing it? The facts are the facts. But yet here we are as sports fans, and you can basically debate anything.
Yeah. How many years later are Dallas Stars, Buffalo Sabres fans arguing about Brett Hall's foot in the crease? Or, you go back to any number of calls in football, baseball, basketball, all kinds of controversial calls, but that's what makes sports beautiful. That's what makes it great. And the debate is what makes it so much fun. So, Erik, thanks so much for joining me again. I hope we can do this again as the playoffs continue, because I really enjoy it. And I know some great comments on the Twitch chat. Alex King Willie Gaiman saying, great chat, guys. What a great guest. So there you go. People enjoy the conversation. So hopefully we can do it again.
Oh, I'm glad. And yeah, anytime, Dean, anytime. Love to do it. All right.
Thanks so much, Erik. Take care.
You got it. Thanks so much.
You bet. There's Erik Grosman from What's Your Call Sports. Check it out on Twitter at WYC Sports. And yeah, seriously, what's your call on anything? You can debate about anything.